Let me start with the simple truth: everyone fears death, even if they claim they don't. But the fear isn't just about pain or the idea of the unknown. It's much deeper, more intricate, and far more unsettling than we realize. It's not the act of dying itself that's terrifying, it's the ripple effect death has on our identity, our relationships, and our perception of time. And if you think you've come to terms with death, maybe you haven't looked closely enough. Think about this: how much of your life is shaped by the knowledge that you'll die? Every decision, every goal, every relationship, it all exists under the shadow of mortality. We rarely acknowledge it outright, but death shapes everything we do. It pushes us to build, to connect, to leave something behind. And yet, no matter how much we achieve, no matter how much we try to prepare, death remains the one thing we can't conquer. But here's the unsettling part. It's not just that death is inevitable. It's that it renders everything finite. Every relationship you cherish, every memory you create, every experience you savor one day, it will all end. And if that doesn't unsettle you, let's go deeper. Even the people who remember you will eventually be gone. Even the legacies you leave behind will one day be forgotten. Death isn't just the end of you, it's the eventual erasure of everything connected to you. Now, let's address a question we rarely ask: what does it actually mean to die? Is it the moment your body ceases to function, or is it the gradual unraveling of your presence in the world? Consider this: when someone you love dies, they don't disappear all at once. Their belongings, their words, their influence, they linger. But over time, even those traces fade. Death is not a single event, it's a process. And that process extends far beyond the moment of physical cessation.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Philosophers have wrestled with the nature of death for centuries. Epicurus famously said, "Death is nothing to us, for when we are, death is not, and when death is, we are not." It sounds logical, even comforting. But is it true? The fear of death isn't about experiencing death itself, it's about everything leading up to it. It's about the anticipation, the uncertainty, the loss of control. And perhaps most unsettling, it's about the existential vacuum it creates. Let's explore that vacuum. If death is the end, what's the point of anything? This is the question that haunts us, even if we rarely articulate it. Some turn to religion for answers, believing in an afterlife or reincarnation. Others turn to legacy, hoping their work will outlast them. But here's the uncomfortable truth: no belief, no achievement, no act of preparation can fully erase the finality of death. And maybe that's why we avoid thinking about it. It's easier to distract ourselves than to face the reality that everything we build is temporary. But there's another layer to this. Death doesn't just take away your life, it challenges your sense of identity. Who are you if you're no longer here? What happens to the self when the body dies? Neuroscience tells us that consciousness arises from the brain, which means when the brain stops, so does the self. But if that's true, then everything you think of as you, your memories, your dreams, your personality is as fragile as the cells in your brain. And if that doesn't scare you, it should. Think about how often we try to define ourselves through our achievements, our relationships, our experiences. But if all of that can disappear in an instant, what does it really mean to be you? This isn't just a philosophical question. It's a deeply personal one. If death erases the self, then everything we do in life takes on a new level of urgency. Every choice, every moment, every connection becomes both infinitely precious and unbearably fragile. But here's where things get even more disturbing. Death doesn't just affect individuals. It affects the fabric of reality itself. The universe, as vast and eternal as it seems, is also finite. Stars burn out. Galaxies collide. Even the universe itself is moving toward entropy, a state of maximum disorder. Death isn't just personal, it's cosmic. And in the face of that, how do we make sense of our tiny, fleeting lives? Let's pause here and think about this. What would life look like if you truly embraced the reality of death? Not just as an abstract concept, but as an ever-present truth. Would you live differently? Would you love more deeply, act more boldly, savor each moment more fully? Or would the weight of that knowledge paralyze you? This is the paradox of death. It gives life meaning, but it also makes that meaning feel unbearably fragile. And yet, most of us don't live with this awareness. We distract ourselves with routines, goals, and entertainment. We tell ourselves stories about immortality through faith, through legacy, through denial. But deep down, we know the truth. Death is coming, and it's not just the end. It's a mirror that reflects the full weight of what it means to be alive. In the next part, we'll go even deeper. We'll explore how different philosophies and cultures have tried to grapple with the terror of death, and whether any of them offer a way to live without fear. We'll also confront the question at the heart of this topic: if death is inevitable, how should we live? Let's go straight into the next layer of this. Death isn't just an abstract concept, it's something that actively shapes how we live, even when we try to ignore it. Every choice you make is influenced in some way by the knowledge that your time is limited. And yet, most of us avoid thinking about it because the weight of that truth feels too heavy to carry. But here's the thing: avoiding it doesn't make it go away. It just makes us more vulnerable to its impact. Different philosophies and cultures have tried to address the terror of death in their own ways. Some look to religion, offering the comfort of an afterlife, reincarnation, or some kind of eternal existence. Others, like the ancient Stoics, encourage acceptance. They suggest that since death is inevitable, fearing it is irrational. But does acceptance truly erase the fear, or does it simply numb it? And what about those who reject the idea of anything beyond death, who see it as the final permanent end? How do they live without despair? Let's take a closer look at that question. If death truly is the end, no afterlife, no reincarnation, no continuation of any kind, what does that mean for how we live? Philosophers like Albert Camus argued that the absence of inherent meaning in life isn't a reason to despair. Instead, it's an opportunity. He suggested that we should embrace the absurdity of existence, finding joy and purpose in the act of living itself. But here's the catch that's easier said than done. Facing death without the comfort of belief requires an extraordinary level of courage. Think about what courage really means in this context. It's not about bravery in the face of danger. It's about living fully in the face of inevitability. It's about knowing that everything you love, everything you build will one day be gone, and choosing to love and build anyway. That's not denial. That's defiance. But let's take this further. Even if you accept death intellectually, there's a difference between understanding it and feeling it. Have you ever been in a situation where the reality of mortality hit you not as a thought, but as a visceral, undeniable truth? Maybe it was the loss of a loved one. Maybe it was a near-death experience. Maybe it was a quiet moment when you realized just how fragile life is. Those moments change you, not because they teach you something new, but because they strip away the illusions you've been clinging to. This is where death becomes more than just an event at the end of life. It becomes a presence that's with us all the time. Every choice you make, every moment you experience, is shaped by the fact that it won't last. And that's terrifying. But it's also what makes those moments meaningful. If life were endless, would we treasure it as much? If we had infinite time, would we still feel the urgency to create, to connect, to grow? Let's talk about growth. Death forces us to grow in ways nothing else can. It pushes us to confront our fears, to question our priorities, to live with a sense of purpose. But it also has a way of exposing the gap between what we say we value and how we actually live. Think about your daily life. How much of your time is spent on things that truly matter to you? And how much is spent on distractions, obligations, or routines that don't align with your values? Death is a constant reminder that time is finite. But do we really live as if we understand that? This brings us to another uncomfortable truth. Most of us don't live fully because we're afraid. Not just of death, but of failure, rejection, or discomfort. We tell ourselves we'll take risks, pursue our dreams, or have that difficult conversation later. But later is a luxury we may not have. Death strips away that illusion of endless time. It forces us to ask what we're waiting for, and whether the fear of living is, in some ways, even greater than the fear of dying. Now let's address something even more unsettling. Death isn't just about losing your own life. It's about losing the lives of those you love. That loss isn't just painful, it's disorienting. When someone you love dies, it feels like part of your own identity has been torn away. Their absence changes how you see the world, and sometimes how you see yourself. It's a reminder that our lives are deeply interconnected, and that death isn't just an individual experience. It's a shared reality. This shared reality raises another question: how do we support each other in the face of mortality? In many cultures, death is treated as something to avoid discussing, as if talking about it will make it more real. But silence doesn't protect us. It isolates us. What would it look like if we approached death not as something to fear, but as something to face together? What if we talked openly about what it means, how it feels, and how it shapes our lives? To live with the weight of mortality requires more than courage. It requires honesty about what matters to you, about the relationships you want to nurture, about the legacy you want to leave behind. Legacy doesn't have to mean fame or grand achievements. It can be as simple as the impact you have on the people around you, the kindness you show, the love you give, the memories you create. These are the things that outlast us, even if they, too, are eventually forgotten. But here's the paradox: the more you try to control your legacy, the less authentic it becomes. True legacy isn't about trying to be remembered. It's about living in a way that leaves an impression naturally, through the choices you make and the values you live by. When you focus too much on how you'll be remembered, you risk losing sight of the present, the only time you truly have. Let's end this part with a thought experiment. If you knew you had a year to live, what would you do differently? Would you spend more time with the people you love? Would you take more risks, express yourself more openly, or let go of grudges and regrets? And if the answer is yes, what's stopping you from living that way now? Death isn't just something that happens in the future. It's a reality that's shaping your life every day. Let's go deeper into what it means to live fully while carrying the awareness of death. Most of us spend our lives running from this reality, chasing distractions, clinging to routines, or crafting a sense of permanence where none exists. But what if facing death head-on isn't just necessary, it's liberating? What if the thing we fear most holds the key to a life of meaning and freedom? To live fully in the shadow of mortality requires a shift in perspective. It's not about pretending death doesn't exist or resigning yourself to its inevitability. It's about letting the reality of death sharpen your focus. When you understand that your time is finite, every moment becomes a choice. You can choose to live passively, letting life happen to you, or you can choose to live intentionally, shaping each day in a way that aligns with what matters most to you. Think about this. How often do you tell yourself you'll start living the life you want someday? Maybe when you have more time, more money, or more clarity about your goals. But someday is an illusion. It's a way of avoiding the discomfort of change. Death removes the luxury of someday. It reminds us that life is happening now. And if you're not living the way you want to, it's not because you're waiting for the right moment. It's because you haven't decided to start. Let's explore the idea of freedom. Most of us think of freedom as the absence of constraints, the ability to do what we want, when we want. But true freedom isn't about escaping limits. It's about choosing how to live within them. Death is the ultimate constraint. It's non-negotiable. But within that constraint, you have infinite possibilities. You can choose how to spend your time, who to love, what to create, and what kind of impact you want to have. Here's an exercise to try and imagine your life as a blank canvas. Every day you add a new brushstroke. Some strokes are bold and intentional, others are small and hesitant. But together, they create a picture or reflection of your choices, your values, and your priorities. Now ask yourself, what kind of picture are you creating? Is it one you're proud of? And if not, what needs to change? The truth is, living fully isn't about grand gestures or dramatic transformations. It's about the small, everyday choices that add up over time. It's about being present in the moments that matter, listening deeply to a loved one, savoring a meal, taking a walk, and noticing the world around you. These moments might seem ordinary, but they're where life happens. And when you live with the awareness of death, you begin to see them for what they are: extraordinary. Let's talk about fear. The fear of death is natural, but it doesn't have to control you. Instead of trying to avoid or suppress it, what if you used it as a guide? Fear can show you what matters most. If you're afraid of losing someone, it's because you love them. If you're afraid of not achieving something, it's because it's important to you. Fear isn't the enemy. It's a compass, pointing you toward what you value. But fear can also paralyze you if you let it. The key is to acknowledge it without letting it dictate your choices. When fear whispers, "What if you fail?" respond with, "What if I succeed?" When it says, "What if you get hurt?" counter with, "What if this brings joy?" Living fully isn't about eliminating fear. It's about choosing to act in spite of it. Now let's address the idea of legacy. We often think of legacy as something big, achievements that outlast us, names remembered for generations. But legacy doesn't have to be monumental. It can be as simple as the way you treat people, the memories you create, or the values you pass on to others. Your legacy isn't defined by the scale of your impact, but by its authenticity. And when you live with intention, your legacy becomes a natural extension of who you are. Here's another way to think about it. Instead of focusing on how you'll be remembered, focus on how you're living right now. Are you showing up fully in your relationships? Are you pursuing what lights you up? Are you creating a life that feels true to you? If the answer is no, it's not too late to start. Death may be inevitable, but how you live is entirely up to you. Let's return to the idea of presence. Presence is the antidote to distraction, regret, and fear. It's the act of being fully engaged with the moment you're in, without getting lost in the past or the future. When you're present, time feels richer. You notice details you would have missed, you connect more deeply with others, and most importantly, you experience your own life as it's happening, rather than as a blur of tasks and thoughts. But presence isn't easy. It requires practice. Start with something simple. The next time you're with someone, give them your full attention. Put your phone away, look them in the eye, and really listen. Or the next time you're outside, pause and notice your surroundings, the way the light falls, the sounds around you, the feel of the air on your skin. These small acts of presence bring you back to reality, grounding you in the life you're living right now. To live fully in the shadow of mortality also means embracing impermanence. Nothing lasts forever, not your achievements, your relationships, or even your own identity. But impermanence isn't a flaw in life. It's what gives life its beauty. The fleeting nature of a moment is what makes it precious. The fact that something can end is what makes it worth cherishing. So what does it mean to live with the awareness of death? It means choosing to love deeply, even though loss is inevitable. It means creating boldly, even though your work won't last forever. It means savoring each moment, not because it's guaranteed, but because it's fleeting. And it means living in a way that reflects your values, your passions, and your truth, because this is the time you have. Let's end with this thought: death is way scarier than you think, but that's not a reason to run from it. It's a reason to run toward life, to live with purpose, presence, and courage, to create a life that feels meaningful, not despite death, but because of it.